But Tom and I have known each other for a couple of years. I'm a big fan of his. He's written 4 previous nonfiction books, all of which are wonderful. And he's currently, well, I should say he's a former journalist, so he's not making stuff up. He knows whereof he speaks. If you want to hear about the history of the railroads or really anything else related to the subject, Tom is an expert. And he's currently a professor of English at Chapman University in Los Angeles. Did I get that right?
Orange, California, actually.
Close enough. He's the reporter, not me. What we're going to do is first that brief little introduction, and then I'm going to ask Tom to read. I'm thankful that I brought a copy of his book because he forgot to today. So Tom's going to do a brief reading, and then he and I are going to have a conversation about a couple of points. And then we're going to open it up to Q&A with the audience for the last 15 minutes or so. So I'm going to let Tom take it away.
Very good. Thank you. And there's actually a quick story about how I got to know Brad, which I think bears telling here. I just moved to Missoula, Montana after having quit my last job at a newspaper. And we all know what's happened to American newspapers in the last decade. And it is a tragic story. And I left the paper that I had last worked for, just feeling very bleak about the future of journalism and my role in it, and what am I gonna do? You know, I'm too talentless to even bag groceries. You know, I just really have no future. So I moved up to Missoula, where I was living next to, as it happened, the railroad tracks, in a dirt cheap apartment, and I decided, you know what, I really ought to get a telephone, even though I can't really afford it. So I called up the local service provider, and they thoroughly botched the job and then sent me a bill for it. And boy, was I mad. You know, how can they get away with this? This is outrageous. How can I fight this? I know, I'm going to write something about it. But wait, I'm no longer a journalist. This is no longer possible. Well, maybe I can freelance something. So I walked down to the local Alt Weekly, which Brad edited, and I told the receptionist, "Hi, I'm here. I'd like to write a story about how terrible the phone company is." And she says, "Okay, wait just a minute." And then, you know, I hear her footsteps going up the stairs, and, you know, I hear this, and then I hear Brad's voice for the very first time saying, no, I really don't have time for this." But I was so angry at the phone company that I persisted. I asked Brad out for a beer, and he accepted, and we cooked up a story.
And now
together.
you know how stories get assigned.
Yeah, exactly. Nothing good results from that. So we cooked up the story. I wrote the story, and I felt so good about that story. I thought, you know what? There is life in this old beast yet, and I'm going to continue to be a writer. So I really have, and I mean this sincerely, Brad to thank for restoring my faith in the power of the written word. So.
You haven't heard what it led to yet, so hold your applause.
All right, I had to tell that story. I love telling that story. All right, this book is about railroads, clearly. You never would have guessed. It's a method of conveyance that I'm absolutely fascinated with, and I never was one of those guys that was, you know, standing by the side of the tracks, you know, writing down locomotive numbers. You know, didn't really have model trains growing up as a kid. Everyone knows guys like that. Perhaps there are some guys like that here. I hope there are. I love talking to those guys, but I never quite shared the fascination of trains as trains. For me, it was always pointing to something different, something harder to express, the ways that we're connected as people. And for me, that's kind of the one word that perhaps lies underneath all the pile of words in this book is connectivity. And there is absolutely, this is a huge cliche. Amtrak used these words in a promotional campaign. There is something magic about a train. And I think many of you here feel that. And that's probably what drew you to this tent. Thank you for that. So with that, that's the spark that got this book going. And I'm going to read quickly here, maybe just 2 or 3 minutes from the introduction, and this hopefully will provide sort of a window into where all of us, I think, can connect with a rail spirit. 20 years after I saw her, I still remember the young woman across the aisle from me on a train through a snowstorm in Pennsylvania. She was half visible in the overhead lamp, wearing a college sweatshirt and holding an open book on her lap. Whatever she was reading was making her cry softly. I couldn't see the title, and I was too shy to ask, but the sight of her wiping away tears, emotionally transported into one world as she was physically transported into another, made me feel my individuality dissolving. Snowflakes struck the dark windows without a sound, but unseen wheels hummed, and outside realities could be subsumed for a while in this linear realm of motion and warmth, 5 hours from Pittsburgh and nowhere in particular. We were standing perfectly still, yet moving over parallel lines of steel, and she seemed like a ghost in the dim light. I cannot ride on a train at night to this day without thinking of her, wishing I had talked to her, but strangely grateful that she remained a cipher. Railroads anywhere, but especially in America, have the power to invoke odd spells like this, a feeling that might be called train sublime, the tidal sway of the carriages, the chanting of the wheels striking the fish plates. To me, this sounds like, dear boy, dear boy, dear boy. The glancing presence of strangers on their own journeys, wrapped in private ruminations. These secret pleasures of a railroad summon forth a vision of sweet pastness, a lost national togetherness. The train is a time traveler itself, the lost American vehicle of our ancestors, or perhaps our past selves. We live in a society that was made by the railroads in ways we never think about anymore. Our imported food at the beat of our music, our huge corporations and their method of stock financing, our strong labor unions, our abstract notion of time, and our sense of everyday connection with people who may live far out of sight, but are made neighbors through mechanical means. Under the skin of modernity lies a skeleton of railroad tracks.
It was awfully short, Tom. And you kind of covered a lot of what I wanted to bring up in my first question, but I'm going to try to rephrase it and ask it anyway. Your connection to trains, how far back does it go? Where did it start? Was it 20 years ago in Pennsylvania and that girl sitting across from you, or earlier
I
than
think,
that?
Yeah, it really was. Having grown up in the U.S., like most of us in sort of a post-passenger train era, I'd always just sort of, when I thought about it at all, thought about Amtrak as just sort of this curious, mediocre thing that, you almost never see. It's sort of like, a Greyhound bus, only, less accessible, and thought vaguely, well, it'd be kind of cool to ride a train. But, it's just, that's something that Grandpa did. This is something that is antique. Technology has passed it by. That was my understanding of it. And it was only when, as a college student myself, sort of taking that trip and feeling like, oh my gosh, there really is something here. And I wanted to learn more, and saw that actually the technology is not dated at all. That this is an incredibly robust, efficient, and absolutely delightful means of getting people around, and there's absolutely no reason for us to have turned our back on it as we did in the 1950s, and there's specific policy reasons why that happened, but none of it has to do with the fact that the train is in any way outdated. Not true.
That leads me into a couple of questions, but one of them is going to point backwards a little bit. Your first exposure to the train, it was an antique entity. You learned better along the way, obviously, but that was your first impression. One of the pieces of the book, sort of a running theme actually, that fascinated me throughout, was how people reacted to it when it was a brand new technology.
Right.
And I wonder if you could talk about the public reaction to the train when it was the first time such a creature had ever been seen on the face of the earth.
Right. This was